Hello. Oh. Grandpa's turn. Oh, it's Grandpa. Hi, Grandpa.
Grandpa,
No, don't leave.
I'm leaving. I'm gonna be on your other side. Oh, you're
Just right here.
okay, okay.
That's all I'm trying
Wait.
to do.
Okay.
I'm
Go
I'm
ahead,
gonna
ask
give
the
you here.
question. You don't have to move it here.
No, Jim, he needs to see
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Mhm.
We're taking Grandpa's photo.
You want to tell about my grandfather?
Wait a minute, no. He's gonna
He's-
ask you a question,
Okay, I can.
and then you answer the question.
Okay.
That's all it is. I'm gonna go see if I can find the pictures.
Okay, say loud, Evan. You have to talk loud and slow and clear.
Okay. Who was the
Don't cover your face. It helps you if you can see your lips.
okay? Who was the first family member to immigrate to the United States? When?
My grandfather was already in Hawaii before it was a state. He was already in Hawaii in 1850s.
Whoa. What was he doing there?
What's this, what?
What was he doing there?
Oh, he probably did what everybody did in Hawaii. In those days, you either worked the pineapple farm or you cut cane sugar.
Okay, Evan's taking notes. Just a minute. Okay, right, 1850s. Okay, what's your next question?
Okay. One more question.
What?
Okay. Which family members came along and who stayed behind?
What was the question?
What family member came along and who stayed behind in China?
Oh, well, my grandfather came to this country with two brothers. His two other brothers stayed in Hawaii. Basically, they left their families behind. I don't think they had the intention of getting them to America. They came here to start their own families. And if they had money, they would send it back home. But their intention was start a new life. They left China.
So your grandfather came with his two brothers to live in Hawaii? To live in Hawaii.
His two brothers remained in Hawaii. I met one of his brothers' family, some of my cousins from my grandfather's brother. I met some of them from Hawaii, not many. Most of the people in my family were born here. They were born here in America, in the Delta, the Sacramento Delta.
So your grandfather eventually came to California.
Yeah. He was in Hawaii. Then he came to the Delta in Sacramento Delta. Your grandfather too. Your other grandfather Roy family were in the Delta. They were in one. They all lived. All the Chinese and Japanese in the Delta lived in Warner Grove, California.
Okay, do you know, Evan started
They had
asking,
the
did you
Japanese
hear the answers?
section and the Chinese section, Chinatown. The Chinatown in Warner Grove burnt once, and then it burnt again a second time. The second time it burnt, that was in the early 1900s. They decided to rebuild in not in Warner Grove, but to Locke, California. They went to a farmer called Clay Locke and asked him for land to build a Chinatown. He gave it to them. So that's how Locke got built. Now, the Chinese call Locke Key. That's not an interpretation of the English derivative of the name Locke. Locke Key means in Cantonese, in Hong San language, means safe haven. That's what it means, Locke Key.
Evan has another question for you, Dad.
Okay.
What was the point of entry? What was the journey like?
What?
He said for your grandfather, what was the port of entry in Hawaii, do you think?
Most is basically the only way to get to Hawaii in those days was by ship.
What was the journey like?
Well, the journey from China to Hawaii
Look at him.
started long ago. The Chinese from Hongsan were probably some of the first people to leave China. And one of the places you always go to, it's not America, it's Hawaii, because Hawaii is closer. It's a halfway trip.
That's
In the
right.
middle of it. And then from there, if you want to continue on your journey by ship, you end up in California. And the reason why you end up in California in those days, say 1850, early 1900, there was a great demand for Chinese railroad workers because the Chinese were very good workers. They built the railroads per mile a day. That's how fast they worked. They outstripped the black people working the railroads. So it was basically black people and Chinese who built the Pacific Railroad. They did, but the Chinese were the ones that did it so fast. That's why they had a great demand for them to come to the West.
Okay, good. Okay, Evan, what other questions you got? What
What
were-
were the reasons?
No, you gotta be clear and look at him.
What were the reasons for leaving someone's home country and immigrating to the United States?
Could you hear him?
Well-
What were the reasons you would leave China? Why did they leave China?
Well, in those days, when my grandfather came, there were many reasons to leave. One, if you stay, you starve. China wasn't doing well. War, famine, revolution. There was a lot of chaos in China. So they left for many good reasons. To basically to have a better life, a normal life. They left for not only building railroads, they also did mining. Now, you heard the word Gumsan. That comes from the fact that the gold rush in 1849 was world known throughout the world. People knew that Americans were finding gold in the streams and the mountains, and it petered out quickly. Within less than 10 years, the gold strikes all over the West died out. All the gold was dug out.
Over in 10 years.
I went to work the railroads. Not only did they work railroads, they also did mining, coal mining. I had
Coal
a
mining.
died of black lung disease working the coal mine. But my grandfather, when he went to Hawaii to start a new life, he married a Hawaiian woman. My first two uncles, only knew one of them. The oldest one was called Herbert. He died before I knew him, but I knew Uncle Fred. Uncle Fred was very dark, very nice man. He was half Chinese, half Hawaiian. And his wife was Japanese.
These are your uncles,
In San Francisco, huh?
your uncles.
Died long ago.
Okay, Evan, what other questions do you have?
What occupation did your immigrant family have?
No, what were the names? Okay, you did that. Okay, well, okay.
Wait a minute, this,
No, yeah, that's okay. Well, they already told you they went to Hawaii. What city did your grandfather end up in California? Sacramento?
They were probably in like all Chinese when you go west. They were probably in all San Francisco for a while, even Stockton, but eventually they settled in Sacramento, not in the town itself, but 28 miles from the town in the Delta, in Warner Grove.
Oh, Locke.
Yeah, that's where they eventually migrated to, was Warner Grove, because they were farm laborers.
So your grandfather was in Locke.
Farm labor. They did farming.
how do you spell lock?
Locke.
So when they were in the Delta in Warner Grove, they developed the agriculture. The Chinese built levees. Those levees still exist today. Those levees allowed people to farm the land. They were like hills with railroad tracks on top. And when they built these levees, it sets the land aside from being flooded. The water will only be let in when you wanted it for the farming. So on the side of the levee, they, as a reward to the Chinese, after paying them for building the levee, they gave them the land so they could farm. But the Chinese were farming a downslope, very difficult because you have to pour the water up so it trickles down. So that's how the Chinese farmed. But the levee flatland was owned by whites, but the Chinese built the levees. They built the levees throughout the Delta. That's what made the Sacramento Delta a rich agricultural land. It was all because of Chinese labor.
So the Chinese were given the lowland, the lowest area? The Chinese were given the lowest area?
Huh?
The Chinese were given the lowest area?
Yeah, they were giving the hillsides. Not given the land, but they could farm it. It belongs to the whites, but the white farmers would not farm a hillside. It's too difficult.
Because it's too high.
You can't. You have a slope, right? To keep the water in the slope, you have to have steps. You know what I mean? Plants only grow up this way. So the hillsides like this, land has to be has to be made possible to grow. So it's very hard farming.
Oh, so the Chinese had to tier it,
These are
it.
miniature rice paddy. You know the rice paddies? They like this. And then downhill, another section of water, downhill, another. That's how they farm the levee on a smaller scale, but the same idea. It was levee farming. It was a rough life. It's tough to work for the white man, his field, and then after you're done, you work your own. It was the levee. And they probably worked until nightfall, beyond nightfall, to live that way.
Wow, you understand, Evan? They got the bad land. They had to tier the hillside just to farm it. I'll draw you a picture later of what he means. Okay, wait, what's your next question, Evan?
Huh?
Is that your
Yeah,
last
I can't-
question? Do you have any more
no.
questions? Well, this doesn't apply to him because he didn't immigrate.
Oh,
Uh,
I need these two and this.
well, maybe he remembers what their recollection is. Do you remember what your grandfather's first impressions were of this country? Impressions?
My grandfather, the first person in my
No, impressions. Impressions. What was his impression of this country when he arrived? What was his impression?
What?
Let's go.
What was his recession?
Impression.
Impression,
Impression.
yes,
What was his impression of this country?
yeah.
Listen to the answer.
My grandfather knew that there was no surprise to him that when he left China, it was going to be hard work. There was no, the reality of Gumsan, Golden Mountain, the myth. He knew that. In fact, when the Chinese first came to this country in the 1800s to look for gold, thousands of them, hundreds of them, all over the Western states who found gold, many of them were killed for their gold. So there's a history of big history of Chinese killings. There was no law against killing Chinese. So a lot of Chinese were killed for their gold. They mined with suicide. As soon as they found the gold, they were killed.
No laws against killing Chinese, Evan. So he knew it would be hard. That was his impression. He knew it would be dangerous.
So,
It's a place of danger.
so the Chinese early on knew that. My grandfather must have known that, the history of the killing the Chinese. That's why they opened up laundries. That's why they started opening up small restaurants, or just to do things that are Chinese, cook food, iron clothes, clean clothes. They made so little money that they were safe doing that kind of work because they weren't attacked.
You understand?
So
That was safe work. Because no one, they have nothing, you can't steal from someone who has nothing.
If you look in the history book in the 1800s to the 1900s, you look at newspapers in those days, there were hundreds of drawings about Chinese, and most of those drawings depict Chinese being abused, kicked at, shot at, hung. It was a very tough time for Chinese.
Discrimination, Evan.
And it's documented. You could look at the early newspapers in the libraries. You could find these like cartoon drawings of the Chinese. It was very negative. Chinese had a really rough. And not only that, because so many Chinese came, they passed a law, they couldn't bring wives and they couldn't own land because they didn't want the Chinese to settle here. But eventually so many of them came, and they finally lightened up on the Exclusion Act laws, because historically they realized that they were being really racist, so they didn't enforce the law. And that's how the Chinese started having families here, because they didn't enforce the law, because they felt it was time to leave the Chinese alone. It was time. And the Chinese had it rough, but they survived till the modern time.
Are there any other questions you want to ask Grandpa?
I still hear stories about Chinese being killed in Sacramento or San Francisco, and people wouldn't be arrested for it. I mean, that's how tough it was for Chinese in this country.
So, I just want to ask. Well, let me check something. So, do you have a second?
I think a lot of these are not applicable, but you tell Grandpa that you read that book. Maybe you have a question. You tell Grandpa what you read.
Okay, so in that
Tell him the book that you read.
You read the Bitter Lemon?
yeah, I read Bitter Lemon a little bit.
You read the book?
Yeah, I read a little bit of the book. It turns out the people.
I tell you, I lived that life in law. I actually, by the time my age, there were the only people left in Locke that lived the hard life were old Chinese men. None of them have wives because of the law. When they were young, they couldn't marry Chinese women. There weren't any here. So they're known as the old bachelors, the old Chinese bachelors. So when I was young in Locke, there were all these old men who worked the farms from years back. They would come to Locke because they built the town. They enjoyed the town because it was Chinese. So they would come. And when I was a young kid, I would shine their shoes and they would give me a quarter or a nickel. And that was a lot of money to shine their shoes. But they did it just to be friendly with me. I remember they would entice me into where they were living in a rented room. They always had a box under the bed. This box was separated. It had photographs of their early life in China, their families, and also in that box, they had cookies, and they would offer me cookies. I ate it only because to be polite. I really didn't want to eat those cookies because they were stale. So, but after they showed me how their life with all the old photos and things that they kept, they offered me the cookies. So out of generosity, I had to eat those cookies.
Grandpa felt bad for them. You felt bad for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I told him that you.
Only
I told Evan that you used to go fishing with Indian. Was Indian Chinese? Remember that homeless man named Indian?
what?
No, a fat. You mean the
What?
guy in the car?
Oh,
Was he a fisherman?
who?
The fat. His name was Fat in the car.
My Uncle Fat?
Was he a fisherman?
Well, he
I don't know
Fat,
if that's the guy
Fat.
you mean.
Locke was surrounded by a slough and the Sacramento River. So when I went fishing in the slough, if I didn't catch a lot of perch, I would go to the Sacramento River. Right away, I would catch a perch, a lot of perch. And then I would bring that home to eat. But Fat would always, he's a bachelor and he's a distant cousin of mine. He's a World War I veteran. He never worked, never. He's a carpenter. He started a job, he never finished it. It was his reputation. So, but whenever he caught a fish, he always tell me, tell your mother I'll be over for dinner. I'm bringing a fish. Because he'd always catch a fish. But my uncle with Fat would eat with us quite often. Because he doesn't cook. In fact, he was renting a room from his brother, and his brother wasn't receiving any rent, so he kicked him out. So my Uncle Fat lived on Key Street. It was the second street of Locke. In the back of his car, he put a mattress. That's how he lived.
So he was homeless.
Mm-hmm.
Did you call him Indian?
Huh?
Was there a character?
Looked like an Indian. So they think he had Indian blood in him, but I don't know. But
That was his nickname.
but the only thing I like about my Uncle Fat, and I like to see him all the time, was I get to see Pancho, his dog. He had a black cocker spaniel. The smartest dog I ever knew was Pancho. Pancho was a real smart dog. He knew how to beg for food because Fat didn't feed him. And a lot of times he would go looking for garbage to eat. He would get sick. And then Uncle Fat would run to the house looking for peanut oil, shoved it down his throat, make him throw up. The Pancho would throw up. But Pancho was a real smart dog. He's a dog that learned how to survive and entertain people at the same time.
Mhm. You have any other questions for Grandpa?
Most of these are not
I know, but
applicable.
you don't have to ask just these. You read that book. Do you have any questions?
Did
for
you
him?
ever go visit Locke? You went, right? No?
Oh, Evan should go to Locke, yeah.
Well, you could still go.
Yeah. Oh, it's
You could go visit where your grandfather lived in Warner Grove. Your
Jitan
your
knew
grandma
Grandpa.
is at where your father grew up is near the Jane Harvey School in Warner Grove. It's still there. The areas, the houses are still there, the Japanese houses. The school is still there. The grounds around that area still there, hasn't changed. You can go visit. And Locke hasn't changed that much, except that there's no Chinese there anymore. It's all
If you don't have a question, I'll ask.
Or-
you. How about you listen to my question?
people that,
That,
Evan has a question.
yeah.
So when did you start working in Locke?
When did I start working in Locke? I was too young to work. When I was in Locke living, it was during the war years. And I was there for only 3 or 4 years.
How old you were when you were?
But I was like, when I was like 8 years old, 9 years old,
No, I thought you were like 4.
4, but I was young. I was 6. I didn't go back to Porterville until the 5th grade. But before that, I was in Locke.
For like.
I had a gun.
No, but ask Grandpa why he went to Locke. Why he was sent to Locke.
My father decided to go to Locke because if I stayed in Porterville, I would have to wear a star. And that star would say that I was Chinese because the Japanese were sent to camp.
Well, you gotta back up from the beginning about what,
Yeah, because
about the Japanese going to camp and
it
the
wasn't,
Chinese were getting, they were thought some Chinese
they were
were
very cruel
Japanese.
to the Japanese because the Japanese didn't do anything, nothing. In fact, they were a lot of volunteers for the soldiers were Japanese. They were sent to fight in Italy. They were the most decorated soldiers in America in history, was the Japanese 442. And when they came back, just like the black people, they found their families were put upon. They lost their homes. You know, they were sent to camp, all those things. And they were fighting for a country that wasn't wasn't nice to their families. So they went through the same things that black people went through throughout their history. They fought for this country, but they received very little reward for it. In fact, they were killed. They were lynched.
He's
in
talking
this
about the
country.
Japanese. So
Uh,
if you had stayed in Porterville, you would have had to wear a star on you?
They couldn't tell the difference between Japanese and Chinese. So,
Oh.
they
I had to
kind of,
wear a star.
yeah, so wearing a star means that you're not Japanese, right?
Yeah, it says it's Chinese.
Yeah,
So we didn't want to wear a star.
so grandpa sent them to
So
Halak.
we moved to Locke, to the area, the Delta. They didn't have that ordinance. It was
Did grandpa go with you to Locke?
No,
No, that's
Where-
why I escaped the negative.
grandpa
Please.
stayed in Porterville. Grandma took the children.
All of us went to Locke.
Not your dad. Your dad too?
Yeah,
I thought he
everybody
remained,
went.
I thought he remained in.
Nobody stayed in Porterville.
I thought he remained.
Well, my cousin stayed in
Wait,
Porterville, you know, but I didn't.
Did your dad do farming in Locke?
No, my father was a
An
herbalist,
herbalist.
Chinese herbalist.
What about grandma?
Grandma always worked in the pier shed in Locke, and then she also was a waitress in a Chinese restaurant that my uncle owned that was very successful in Porterville.
Gangsu.
Yeah,
Yeah.
gangsters.
But she packed pears in Locke.
Huh?
She packed pears in Locke.
Yeah. Yeah, the main industry in Locke is piers. That's all there was. Piers.
They, you know,
That's
they
why
had
the
house-
Chinese were in Locke, because Clay Locke knew even in China, the experts in pier farming were Chinese. So he was very smart. He let the Chinese work all his piers. His
Do you have
piers
any
were-
other questions?
No,
There was
your question, Mom.
somehow the law against Chinese owning land wasn't enforced. So there was one Chinese guy, he became very wealthy. He owned piers. His name was Lum Bun. Yeah, if you didn't work for a lot, you know, doing piers, the Chinese worked for Lum Bun. He's Chinese.
Hmm.
His sons today, they look white. They're part Chinese, but they're several generations married to white. Their farms are still going today. In fact, they had a special on TV that visited his family, but they don't look Chinese anymore.
Hmm.
The
They married white people.
Lump
families.
great grandchildren. Yeah, because pear farms last a long time. Pear trees lives 350 years, produces fruit.
Wow.
Those trees probably were his great-grandfather's trees, great-great-grandfather's trees, same trees.
Didn't
producing
you
pears.
tell me? I thought you told me that your father worked in the shipyards.
He in the war, he worked in the shipyard. Somewhere in Pittsburgh, California. I think he was a guard in Pittsburgh.
Oh. As a
So he
guard.
would be 6 days a week, 5 days a week in Pittsburgh. He would come home on weekends, spend Saturdays, Sundays, and he'd go back to his job.
Hmm. Okay, you have any other questions?
That's only
Who were his
for
clients?
3
If you-
years, you know. Then we went back,
In Locke, if
and
he
then
was
he
an
would
herb,
do. Or in the house, he had a room where people come, the office, and then he have his herbs in a special room. And he would, whoever wanted Chinese medicine and his advice on their physical problems, he would be my father's patient.
That would
There's some
be,
people believe in herbs.
that was in lockdown? He did it-
Porterville,
Oh, he did it in Porterville?
Yeah.
No, but did he have herbs in Locke as well?
no,
What did he do when he was in Locke?
he worked in Pittsburgh.
Oh, I thought you said the whole family went to Locke.
Yeah,
So,
my father be gone
oh, I
most of the
see.
time in
Oh,
Pittsburgh. He had a
I
had-
see.
he had a guard job in the shipyard in Pittsburgh, California.
so when he was an herbalist in Porterville, did he only have Chinese clients or was it Chinese and white people interested in herbs?
Well, you see, the Chinese and the white people in Porterville had a special relationship. At that time, in the early 40s, 30s, and 20s, white people also worked in the pear industry. So, like, for instance, where my mother packed pears, the pear shed, Roy Thompson, a friend of mine, his father was the foreman. He ran the pear shed. And then I had other people that I knew in Porterville before I went to Locke, when I was really, really young. They also went to Porterville because of the pears. And when I moved back to Porterville, that was in the late 40s. They also moved back. So I visited them as a young child. And I grew up going to school and stuff with some of them. Danny Honested, a good friend of mine, fell in love with one of the girls I knew, Martha Simpson. Her family was in Locke in those days, early days. Later on, we reunited in Porterville, but Danny's heart was broken because the Simpsons didn't want Danny to marry their daughter because he wasn't college material. Broke his heart.
Hmm.
He never got over it.
But the Simpsons moved to Locke too?
Couldn't get over it.
The Simpsons moved to Locke
Huh?
too?
Yeah, a lot of white people I knew, they were in the Delta. They weren't in Locke, but they might have lived in Warner Grove or Lodi, wherever. But there are always white people farming. They had the best jobs.
Hmm.
Yeah, but you're
White
cutting out.
people, when government contracts started coming to California, most that's where they get high-paying government jobs. Everybody, for Boeing, North American, all those big industries are federally funded. They're federal program to keep America strong. They build planes, tanks, trucks, whatever, heavy industry. They were government contract jobs. So you were building trucks for the Army or the Navy, you're building ships, you're building airplanes for the government. Government contract jobs created LA, made it really big. But so a lot of people, most of the white people got the best jobs. They went, all of them went for government contract work. When my brother graduated from college, he was a mechanical engineer. Right away, his job, well-paying job as an engineer, McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, whatever. He was, and then later on, he learned electrical work, electrical engineering on the job. He was doing